America is the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our special, The Education Issue. It is a big issue because one reason why America has been the greatest country in the world is because we're pretty smart, and right now we're pretty dumb. I'm always thinking about and also being very sad about the state of education in America today. It is abysmal and embarrassing and pathetic. Example 10 million is UCSD, University of California, San Diego. This is one of the prestigious UC schools. So in California, you have at the top, you have the UC system, UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC San Diego. Those are like the top three. And then you have like the state schools, and then there's levels below that. But like these are like the best of the best. At UCSD, they're teaching remedial math to college students. Remedial math, the catch-up math, at a first grade level. First grade remedial math to college students at not only a good UC school, but one that's known for being like a math and science oriented UC school. This is an article from The Atlantic. It's called A Recipe for Idiocracy. What happens when even college students can't do math anymore? The article says that for the last few years, America's been using young people as lab rats for a education experiment where schools across the country lowering standards, removing penalties for failure. It's been going on for decades, but kicked up even more post-COVID. 5 years ago, this article says about 30 incoming freshmen at UC San Diego had math skills below a high school level. That's a middle school level. And by the way, this report, this is from a faculty report in UC San Diego. Like they're admitting this themselves. There are now 900 kids taking remedial math courses, and some aren't even at a middle school level. Last year, the university, by the way, it's a 30% undergraduate acceptance rate. So they just launched their remedial math courses that focus on elementary school. So what kind of stuff are we talking about? So this report says that 60% of students who took the remedial course can't divide a fraction by 2. So you give them 1/2, like a half a cup of something, you say divide it by 2, they don't know what that means, they don't know what to do. But I think even worse than that is one of the tutors in this remedial math class at this college, which is, by the way, $44,000 a year to go to, said that the students, the bigger issue isn't even the fact that they don't know how to do the math. This tutor said, they don't even know how to begin solving word problems. So even just like logically, like they don't even know like what it is, like what to do. They don't even know where to start. They're so dumb. They look at it like, I don't even, you know what I'm saying? It's not even, I don't know how to do this math problem. They don't even know what math is. They don't even know how to think about the problem. Here's the kind of questions, right? So this is 7 plus 2 equals x plus 6. I gave that to my first grader. My daughter's in first grade. She got that right. Not to brag, pretty easy. The chair of the math department at UC Davis says we call it quantitative literacy. Just even knowing which fraction is smaller or larger, or that the slope is positive when it's going up. Can't even conceptualize that. So what in the world is going on? This is so horrific. And this article talks about the use of AI, and because kids are using AI, they can't think. Yes. This author blames the lack of standardized tests. Yes. Black Lives Matter said that standardized tests were racist because black kids didn't do well in them. This article talks about that. They say during W. Bush's administration, there was a policy where if a school was doing really bad on standardized tests, they would get more money at first, but if they didn't improve, then they would have their funding pulled. So there's an incentive to improve and keep improving. And this article says that research suggests that it helped, especially poor black students. But after 2015, Barack Obama, the federal government backed off from its accountability measures. Great. And then they started giving, no zeros, you got to pass everyone. And if you're at this point where you got to pass everyone and there's no grades, like, well, why even assign anything to begin with? Here's where I think it gets worse. It just keeps getting worse. This article says that more than not just this article, the report from UC San Diego, says that more than a quarter of the students who were placed in the first grade elementary school remedial math courses they got straight A's in high school. Not only straight A's in high school, but straight A's on their high school math classes. Almost all of them took advanced math courses in high school. So these, like if you told me this story, I would say, oh yeah, like the kids in remedial math, they were the C students in high school, right? In math class, they really struggled in math, or they were A students and everything else, but C students in math, and they really need that extra help. Nope, they were great math. They got A's in math in high school, in advanced math courses, and can't understand what a fraction is. 25% of the kids in remedial math, 25% of the kids had a 4.0 GPA in math. The average was a 3.7 in math. So the grades of the kids in remedial math in 2025 were higher than the students admitted in 2020. So their grades were higher, but they are dumber. They were given A's in AP Calc, but they would get the lowest score on the AP Calc test. And they keep getting promoted. They keep advancing. But they can't. If you can't do the base, you can't do any higher levels. But the teachers would just push them through because they don't hurt their college prospects. So they make it all the way to college before they even know that they're dumb and can't do first grade math. If only there was some sort of test, some sort of way to find out, some sort of like standardized scholastic test that measured every student's, aptitude. Like if there was like a standardized aptitude test, SAT would be like a nice acronym, a standardized aptitude test that everyone could take it all across the country. And it would be hard, but the point of it would be no matter what high school you went to, you could measure all the kids by the exact same standard. That would be a good idea, but of course that's racist, we were told. Here's the Atlantic. The UC system eliminated its best tool for assessing students' academic preparedness. In 2020, system leaders voted to phase out standardized test scores out of admissions decisions. They argued that the test worsened racial divides and unfairly privileged wealthy students. But SAT and ACT scores are the most reliable predictors of a student's math ability, the report found, of course. But they had to get rid of it because black kids don't do as well in the SAT. So that disparity proves racism, proves that the test is racist, so we're going to eliminate the test. Now listen, I don't care about UCSD, whatever. I care about people in my country not knowing any math. It's really bad. It's bad for people's employment. It's bad for building things. It's bad for like not being able to build anything. It's bad for critical thinking skills. I think one of the reasons why, I don't know if anyone's made this point before, maybe, probably. I don't think I have like an original point here, but I think one reason why so many people fell for COVID was because people don't know math. And because people couldn't think clearly. They didn't know numbers. They didn't know what numbers meant. So the government could release numbers of things and no one knew if it was good or bad or going up or going down or what per capita meant or what the percent chance of something happening was or the likelihood of a thing, let alone R naught. Or like, what's the R naught? Like, what's the cycle threshold? Like, people didn't know what numbers were. So it made people really easy to be manipulated. To the point where one of the initial panic moments was when the government released a graph. This graph right here, we have the graph with no numbers on it. There's no numbers on the graph. This is a graph about hospital capacity. Remember, we got to flatten the curve. 2 weeks to flatten the curve because you don't want that big red bump, right? Because then, there's hospital capacity, a big red bump, bad, people die, it's red, right? And people were like, oh, red, bad, and then we freaked out. There were no numbers on the graph. But whatever, we all fell for it because we lost the ability to think. So yeah, AI is bad because it'll help you get the right answer. But if we don't know why the answer's right or why it matters that it's right or how to think through solving problems, we're done. We're done, it's over. Forget about building a bridge anymore. We'll forget how to do things. It doesn't make us smarter. As someone wrote on Twitter, in just a decade, education activists in the US managed to set back student outcomes by 50 years, an impressive accomplishment rivaled only by the Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan.
My name's Teacher Green, and something I like about my classroom is that my students built the trans flag last year. We had the pleasure of reading a book called Melissa about a transgender fourth grade girl, and it was very impactful for all of us. Afterwards, we built the trans flag using the shapes of our hands.
Does everybody agree with the gender they were assigned? No. Some of us maybe. Some of us might go, yeah, that's definitely me. But some of us might be looking at that paper and going, I'm not a boy, I'm not a girl. And that's exactly how trans people feel. This week is Trans Visibility Week. What does it mean to be visible? Yes, to be seen. Whether or not you agree with transness, trans people do exist. You might not see them every day. You might not even realize it's a trans person at all. That's because they're regular people living regular lives.
What in the world is going on? The great Jeremy Wayne Tate is here. He is the founder of the Classical Learning Test, which we will tell you all about in just a moment. Jeremy, great to talk to you, brother.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
What's one of your go-to examples of the current state of our education system? I mean, that's more of a social problem that we just heard right there. But we were talking about UCSD and how all the kids going into UCSD don't know first grade math. So that's more of an academic issue. What's your big concern?
Yeah, I think we see so many examples of, the gender ideology and that sort of thing in classrooms. I think the greater crisis, though, is that if you go into any classroom and you ask students, what's the point of school? What are we doing here? Almost every kid is going to tell you something like, it's to get a better job, right? And that is a very impoverished view for what education is, right? The older answer was always that the purpose of education was to grow in virtue, to expand the mind, to grow in wisdom. And the truth is right now, we don't even know what jobs are going to look like in 5 or 10 years with the AI revolution. And so we need to go back, I think right now more than ever, to first principles education as a deep dive into what it means to be human.
Because we're so many generations now into the straying from the right path. When do you pinpoint that left turn or whatever, where we just lost our way?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great book, a New York Times bestseller, The Battle for the American Mind. My dear friend David Goodwin, he's the head of the Association of Classical Christian Schools. He co-authored this book with Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, and they outline what happened throughout the 20th century. And so essentially, there's 4 big levers that kind of control education, right? What are these levers? Well, they're these. It's teacher certification, right? What do you have to do to become a teacher? And right now, you've got to go ingest a whole bunch of crazy ideologies at the ed schools, at all of our colleges and universities. It's one. The other is accreditation, right? What is a school and what isn't? How do you become a school? Accrediting the flow of public funds, right? Where we've had all of the taxpayer money, and there's no way to opt out of this, go to support failing schools, where we know objectively that the very best schools are Catholic schools or Christian schools. These are the schools that are getting hard results, right? The average CLT, SAT, ACT score at a Christian school is about 20% higher, same for homeschoolers, than the public school. So we're not funding what actually works. We're continuing to fund the failing public school system. And the other big lever, of course, is standardized testing. The standardized testing ultimately shapes the academic focus at a school. And so all 4 of these big levers, they got kind of hijacked in the early 20th century by radical progressives. And that's why we've been in this condition we've been in. Education, I mean, think about this. What we consider education, it's completely different from what America's founding generation thought we were talking about by education, right? But right now, there's a recovery movement happening right now. Some people call it the classical renewal movement, the homeschooling movement, but it is fast and it is underway, and we're taking education back.
Yeah, what is a classical Christian school?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing we're talking about is the goal, or what we call the telos in education, right? And the goal for a classical Christian school is the cultivation of virtue, or what you might even call Christian sanctification. And I think there's a great paradox here, is that even though the goal of a classical Christian school is not to make employable graduates, they end up making the most employable graduates. I've got about 65 full-time here at CLT, And we mostly hire people who have had this kind of formation growing up, either homeschooled or at a classical Christian school. And because they're well-grounded, ethically, morally, they're just good people. They also then make incredible employees as well. And the other thing with this is that education was always, how does G.K. Chesterton define education? He says it's the soul of a society as it moves from one generation to the next, right? This beautiful transmission of this timeless intellectual inheritance. We've completely lost that in the mainstream public schools, but that's what it is in a great Catholic school or classical Christian school. They're passing down the Western intellectual inheritance from one generation to the next.
Yeah, well, one major reason why we've lost so much sight of who we are and why this country matters and we matter and the soul matters. Goodness. I always tell this story, but we talked to one of the foremost psychologists a couple years ago. We were talking about bad news and what bad news does to the brain. That's what he wrote about. And I said, what does it do to the soul? And he said, oh, as psychologists, we don't study the soul. I said, that's weird because the word psychology literally means study of the soul. Like, that's just a good example of how far we strayed. But like, can you talk about rigor for a second? Because, you know, every once in a while people will see online like this test from 1827 and it's super hard. And I think about what our founding fathers knew, and like we've shared before, the letter that Thomas Jefferson gave to his nephew. And it's like, well, make sure you read all these classics, and it's all these ancient Greek writers, like half of them I never even heard of. And he's like, of course you got to read them in their original Greek. And then you can move on to these. You're like, what? This kid's 15 years old. How were the standards so high then and now they're so low?
Yeah, you know, there's that great quote, you know, I think it's John Sorup says, you know, we in 100 years, we went from teaching Greek and Latin in high school to teaching remedial English in college. And it's kind of funny, but it's sad, and it's totally true. Look, you can go back and look at something like the Harvard entrance exam. The copy we have is from 1869, but it was the exam that was the Harvard entrance exam for most of the 19th century. And what are they doing? Well, they're translating Greek and Latin, right? And so what that did was it shaped the kind of education, you know, building up to that. But what actually happened was this. I mean, you have the revolution in education in the early 20th century, John Dewey and others. And what they said was that students shouldn't have to learn anything they're not going to use, right? Well, when are you going to use philosophy? When are you going to use poetry? When are you going to use classical literature? When are you going to use Latin, right? And so we got rid of all of these things because they're not practical. But what we got rid of in the process was civilization itself, right? We got rid of the rich, beautiful, timeless cultural inheritance that always made the West great. And it's the thing that has gotten us into the crisis that we're in right now. Every single issue, every one is downstream from education, right? You shape hearts and minds, and then that's what's going to set the policies for the next 50 years. But again, I'm optimistic because I think we're in the midst of a great recovery movement right now.
And I want to ask you about the CLT, but one comment quickly. To my shame, I've never read a fiction book my whole life until a couple months ago. I read East of Eden, and yeah. I think about it all the time. Like it pops up in my so this idea of practicality. Like, when are you going to use that? It's like always running in the background software of my brain constantly. Yeah. And informs how I make decisions and think about the world all the time. So is it practical? Like, I don't know, like, no, but also, yeah, it's the most practical thing I've ever done, maybe. So just a shame how we've come to look at it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Please go on.
Oh, yeah, I think the first one I read was actually Crime and Punishment back in college, and it was like, this is a psychological thriller about a guy who commits a double murder, in the 1800s, and you're like, how could this possibly relate at all? Well, what happens is throughout the course of the book is he's keeping this horrible, dark secret, and the guilt of it takes over his mind, it takes over his whole life, and in some ways it shows how sin disfigures us and shatters all of our relationships and comes to completely own us, right? And so in some ways, these things that are not relevant are the most relevant at the end of the day.
That's great. I saw this video of this, I don't know, it's maybe, I'm going to be 18-year-old, ghetto-looking black guy, dreadlocks, whole thing, and he read Frankenstein. And he's like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read in my life. And he went through all the deep themes of Frankenstein. And he's like, why have people kept me from these amazing works of art? Everyone can benefit from this stuff. It's a crime, really, that we've kept it from people. So let's go to the CLT. So you're a part of the solution. So what is the classical learning test?
Yeah, it might seem like a weird thing, right? Of like, who cares about a standardized test? What could be more boring than a standardized test? Well, as I said a minute ago, this is what we believe is a major lever that if you can change this one thing, the college entrance exam, then it's going to fundamentally reorient, even redefine what it means to be educated coming out of high school. So if you imagine as a hypothetical that on the SAT and ACT, students were always expected to be able to read something from maybe Aristotle's Politics, maybe Plato's Republic, maybe a passage from Cicero, maybe something from John Adams or from John Locke, that would reshape what happens at the high school level in a very, very powerful way. So CLT is an alternative to the SAT and ACT, but we're drawing heavily from the Western Catholic Christian intellectual tradition, because really that is the intellectual tradition that gave birth to America.
And you guys have had incredible success. So who takes the CLT? And I know you've been working with Secretary of War to get this into our military schools as well. But what does it look like? Who would take it? And why would someone take it now?
Yeah, it's been incredible working with Secretary Hegseth. I mean, he refers to CLT as the gold standard. And that's certainly true, for the service academies and hopefully for, more and more, colleges and universities as well. So, 10 years ago, it was mostly homeschool students, classically oriented students that were taking the CLT. But more and more, it's mostly just public school students who either have an interest in the humanities or maybe they want to go somewhere like West Point or the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy. And they know that the CLT is a better way to showcase their academic ability and to really put their best foot forward.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Jeremy, keep up the great work, man. Praying for you. Really grateful for everything you're doing on Twitter. You're reaching a lot of people there. I mean, you're doing great stuff on Twitter, like really opening up people's eyes to beauty and the important things of life. And then to do it on the ground and like operate within the system that currently exists, but totally transform it at the same time. That's really awesome. Where can people learn more about the classical learning test?
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah. So cltexam.com is their website. And then, follow me on X at Jeremy Tate 41. Thanks for the encouraging words and keep up the good work.
Yeah, you too, brother. We'll do it together. Thanks, man.